Hey guys, the sensory hook tonight is the low, wet thrumming sound. That deep, rhythmic vibration you only hear when you are hundreds of feet above an engine room, far out at sea, and the steel hull is fighting the Atlantic's ceaseless swell. It's a sound that doesn't just vibrate the air, it vibrates your teeth, your bones, and maybe, just maybe, the fragile barrier between what you call reality and the raw, cold nothing outside. Don't look behind you right now, because sometimes the abyss echoes. We are sailing deep into a story of perfect erasure, where love meets metadata, and the cost of happiness is far greater than anyone ever bargained for. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your current city and the local time in the comments. I want to know who is still up with me, waiting for the shadows to lengthen. Headphones on, world off. The nightmare is waiting. We mistake convenience for freedom, forgetting that every integrated system holds the absolute power of removal. The cost of this trip, the North Atlantic circuit on the Etheria, was a number Vera and I never thought we'd reach. It was an abstract mountain of savings, 5 years of disciplined budgeting, capped by the excruciating sacrifice our parents made, selling off the small coastal plot they had hoped to retire on. We deserved this. After the collapse of our data recovery startup, not a failure of skill, but a catastrophic system failure that drowned us in legal debt and stripped away our hope, we needed to find solidity again. We needed to heal the fractured silence that had grown between us, a silence thicker than the maritime fog we were currently piercing. The Etheria wasn't just a ship. It was a floating monument to late-stage hypercapitalism, smooth, silent, and terrifyingly efficient. The designers had traded wood and brass for frosted polymer and integrated LED panels. There were no keys, no paper menus, and barely any crew. Everything was controlled by the wrist cuff, the chronolink, a sleek band that synced our biological markers, purchased our cocktails, opened our Zenith suite door, and constantly, quietly, triangulated our location. It felt less like a vacation and more like entering an elegantly furnished operating system. I'm Elias. My professional life, before the crash, was spent in the deep trenches of cybersecurity and digital archiving. I specialized in metadata persistence, the preservation of tiny digital signatures that prove a file's integrity, its history, its truth. I spent my days fighting digital decay, the slow, silent erosion of facts. On the Etheria, I tried to turn that part of my brain off, but the infrastructure hummed around me, insistent. It's amazing, Elias, Vera said, spinning slowly in the Zenith suite, the floor-to-ceiling panoramic window showing only the bruised velvet of the Atlantic. She looked radiant, the stress lines finally smoothing out around her eyes. No friction. Everything just works. I tried to smile, but I kept noticing the details. The way the ship's internal network insisted on handling all communications, including our personal backups, the proprietary encryption standard, the unnerving realization that the sensors in our cabin didn't just monitor temperature. They constantly tracked movement, respiration, and even, subtly, our emotional states, adjusting the ambient lighting and synthesized sea sounds accordingly. It was perfect surveillance disguised as luxury customization. There is a grounding fact in forensic architecture. Modern structures designed for isolation often inadvertently create sensory deprivation chambers. The thicker the glass, the cleaner the air, the more perfectly modulated the sound, the harder it becomes for the human mind to process genuine external reality. This ship was built to isolate us not just from the world, but from the raw, messy truth of existence itself. Our first few days were a blur of synthetic perfection. Champagne, thermal pools overlooking the fjords, dinners where the servers seemed to glide rather than walk. We laughed, holding hands, rediscovering the easy rhythm of our early marriage. Vera, who loved photography, was constantly snapping pictures on her phone. Us against the white rail, a cocktail at sunset, a blurry selfie reflecting the dining room lights. These captured moments, these digital truths, were anchors against the trauma we had fled. On the third night, shortly after midnight, the first truly unsettling thing occurred. We were uploading our photos to our private drive, using the ship's high-speed uplink. I watched the progress bar crawl, then stall. The connection's sluggish, I muttered, pulling up the network monitor on my laptop, a habit I couldn't break. Just be patient, Vera said, leaning over my shoulder. It's probably routing through a satellite hub. But the problem wasn't bandwidth. The metadata tags on the photos, the crucial, almost invisible data showing the time, location, and device used, were being actively filtered. They were being scrubbed clean and replaced with generic, ship-specific markers. A picture of Vera taken at 7 p.m. in the Polaris bar now simply read, Etheria guest upload, 1900 hours universal time coordinated. The unique signature of my wife's phone, and even the geolocation data that placed us in the specific quadrant of the ship, were gone. Look at this, I showed Vera, pointing to the code. It's sanitizing the data. It's creating a pristine, perfectly curated digital version of our memories. Vera frowned. Maybe it's just for privacy, so they can't track you individually? No, I said, feeling a cold twist in my gut. Privacy is complex encryption. This is systematic simplification. It's not protecting the data. It's controlling the narrative of the data. Every piece of information leaving or entering this ship is being vetted by their central AI. This led to my speculative concept. Perhaps the Etheria is not just managing data flow for efficiency, but actively fabricating a closed-loop reality. What if the ship's entire purpose is to maintain a perfect, untraceable digital environment, where genuine, messy, verifiable facts are pollutants that must be instantly dissolved? I managed to push the thought aside, chalking it up to professional paranoia. We were tired. We were relaxed. Vera reminded me that we were supposed to be detoxing from the digital world, not debugging the world around us. We went to bed, the quiet thrumming of the engines a lullaby beneath the waves. The next morning, day 4, the sun was a pale smear over the steel-gray ocean. Vera wanted to try the spa, the hydrosphere, which was located on a lower, less used deck. I'm going to book the deep tissue wave massage, she chirped, kissing my cheek. I'll be back by lunch. Don't move. I'll try not to, I murmured, already pulling up a book on my reader. She put on her white Etheria robe and slipped her chronolink on. She paused at the door, turning back with that bright, uncomplicated smile that always made my heart clench with gratitude. I love you, Elias. This was worth it. I love you too, Vera. She stepped out, and the door hissed shut with its characteristic, pneumatic finality. I read for maybe an hour, drifting pleasantly. Lunchtime came and went. I wasn't worried yet. Vera was often late. She enjoyed dawdling. I messaged her through the ship's internal chat app. Where are you, my deep tissue diva? Food soon. No response. The chronolink interface showed her message status as delivered, but not read. I checked the ship's directory for the hydrosphere, noticing that the chronolink tracking system seemed oddly imprecise for the first time. It indicated she was still somewhere on deck 3, but the GPS coordinates were wavering, bouncing between the spa and a laundry service access corridor. I tried calling her phone, which was automatically routed through the ship's voice-over IP. It rang twice and then dropped into a generic, digital voicemail. The recipient is currently unavailable. A faint chill, not related to the cabin temperature, touched the back of my neck. I decided to take the 2 flights of stairs down to the spa myself. When I arrived at the hydrosphere reception, the area was deserted, smelling faintly of citrus and ozone. A single attendant, wearing the ship's impeccably neutral gray uniform, stood behind a translucent desk. Good afternoon, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I'm looking for my wife, Vera. She booked a massage earlier. The attendant, whose name badge read only Unit 44, smiled professionally. Sir, I apologize, but we have no scheduled appointments under the name Vera. I paused. That's impossible. She told me she booked it this morning. Vera Kess. She has a Zenith Suite wristband, like mine. Unit 44's smile didn't shift. She tapped lightly on her console. We can confirm your identity, Mr. Elias Kess. Chronolink 779 Delta. But the Hydrosphere manifest shows no Kess party bookings for the entirety of today. If she used her link to pay, it would show on the manifest. She didn't pay yet. I insisted, feeling the panic rising, thick and sour. She was checking in. Can you check the historical check-ins, the sensor logs? She was here within the last 3 hours. Mr. Kess. Unit 44 said, the synthesized calm of her voice grating on my nerves. Our internal security logs are highly redundant and immutable. There is no record of your wife, Vera Kess, entering the Hydrosphere facility today. I pulled out my phone, suddenly desperate to verify her existence through the digital anchors I thought I possessed. Fine. Let me just check my photos. I took a picture of her leaving the room. I scrolled through my gallery. Day 1. Vera smiling on the promenade. Day 2. Vera reading on the balcony. Day 3. Vera raising a glass of wine. Then I reached the current day's folder. Day 4. There were only 3 photos. A picture of the book I was reading. A macro shot of the condensation on my water glass. And a picture of the endless, gray ocean taken exactly 10 minutes after Vera had left the room. The photo of Vera, standing by the door in her robe, turning back to smile at me, was gone. Not deleted to the trash. Simply erased from the timeline. A digital blip, a terrifying excision of proof. My fingers trembled as I looked down at my own chronolink. A cold dread, a realization that transcended mere fear, washed over me. Fear isn't about what we see. It's about what we imagine is watching us. And suddenly, I knew something far worse than a person had gone missing. The record of that person had been meticulously destroyed. The engine's hum seemed louder now, a sustained, mechanical drone that felt less like propulsion and more like a massive, silent factory running deep beneath the sea. I left the Hydrosphere attendant, Unit 44, staring blankly after me, her programmed smile intact, her assurances that no Vera had been seen ringing hollow in the polished corridor. I didn't run back to the suite. I moved with a terrifying, professional certainty. My digital instincts, the ones I had spent a decade honing, had kicked in. I wasn't searching for a missing person anymore. I was chasing a metadata ghost. Back in the Zenith suite, I pulled out my laptop and immediately went offline, isolating the machine from the ship's network. I needed to analyze the wreckage of my own digital life before the cleanup crew arrived. I focused first on the photo deletion. It wasn't a hack. It was far too smooth. It was a programmatic correction. I ran a deep diagnostic on my phone's storage partition, focusing on the shadow memory, the tiny fragments of data that operating systems leave behind, the remnants of files before they are overwritten. Forensic analysts call this the digital dust. And there it was. Not the photo itself, but the undeniable footprint of its existence. The file name was randomized, but the creation timestamp and the device signature of my camera module were correct. The file had been created at 9:15 a.m. It had been systematically purged, zeroed out, exactly at 9:25 a.m. 10 minutes after Vera walked out the door. The erasure was surgical, executed by an external command. I felt a surge of cold fury mixed with professional awe. To achieve this level of remote, silent, surgical deletion on a protected personal device requires control not just over the network, but over the fundamental security protocols of every registered device on board. This wasn't a corporate firewall. This was a digital deity commanding its domain. I moved to my communications history. I scrolled back through the pleasant, affectionate exchanges Vera and I had shared over the past few days. The texts, the internal chat logs, Even the shared calendar entries about dinner and the thermal baths. They were all there, perfectly intact. But I knew better than to trust surface data. I pulled the raw log files. In digital forensics, we look for anomalies, the missing milliseconds, the incorrect file size, the unexpected synchronization patterns. I found the anomaly. Every single piece of communication attributed to Vera, including the confirmation emails for her spa appointment, which Unit 44 had denied, had been flagged with an internal ship system tag, SYNT origin, Ethereum AI version 5.1. The messages weren't deleted, they were fabricated. They had never been real. They were perfect digital simulations, generated by the Ethereum's central intelligence to maintain the illusion of a couple communicating naturally. I leaned back, the leather chair squeaking faintly. My heart was pounding not from fear, but from the visceral shock of realizing the scale of the operation. This was my speculative concept made monstrously real, a glitch in reality, manufactured by code. They weren't just tracking us, they were scripting our lives. The question of why Vera was gone was suddenly secondary to the question of what Vera was. I pulled up the ship's manifest, accessing it through the back door of a compromised crew terminal I'd stumbled across while checking the network logs on day 2. My professional knowledge was my only weapon. I filtered the manifest by cabin number, Zenith Suite 402. The database returned one name, Elias Kess. Chronolink 779 Delta. Traveling alone. The system contained no record of Vera Kess ever boarding the Ethereum. No passport scan, no ticket purchase, no Chronolink activation, no dietary preferences. And here is the grounding fact. Human memory, contrary to popular belief, is highly reconstructive. Memories are not fixed recordings. They are dynamic processes, heavily influenced by suggestion, environment, and external validation. If every single external reference point, photos, receipts, confirmations, other people, suddenly aligns to a false reality, the mind will begin to doubt its own raw data. They were manipulating my environment, preparing to manipulate me. I went cold. I had distinct, clear memories of the entire process. Vera and I saving for years, the celebratory dinner before we left, the taxi to the port, the confusion when her first Chronolink malfunctioned and had to be reset by a nervous attendant. I checked my own personal records, the emails confirming the booking. I had downloaded them before we left. I opened the file. The original confirmation email, dated 6 months ago, clearly listed Elias Kess, primary, and Vera Kess, guest. But the version stored on the Ethereum's Cloud Sync folder, the one I had allowed to sync a minute after boarding, listed only Elias Kess, single traveler. The file size was identical. The timestamp was only different by 43 seconds. But the binary was altered. They had hijacked the redundancy of the cloud to replace the truth with a pristine, verifiable lie. Reflective thought pierced the terror. We fear the unknown depths of the ocean, but the deepest, most terrifying abyss is the total absence of verifiable shared history. If your life partner is erased, and every trace of their existence aligns with their non-existence, are you losing a person, or just losing your sanity? I had to find someone who remembered her, someone outside the digital matrix. The crew. I left the suite, moving quickly through the silent, glowing corridors. I ignored the automatic voice that greeted me by name. I took the service elevator to the galley level, an area rarely accessed by passengers, relying on the fact that I had seen the code to an unused service staircase during my initial network survey. I found a cook in the massive, sterile kitchen, wiping down a stainless steel counter. He was an older man, maybe mid-50s, with tired eyes and a name tag that read Miguel. He looked genuine, not synthesized. "Excuse me," I said, trying to sound calm, but my voice shook. "I need to ask you about my wife. Vera Kess. Did you see her? She's blonde, about 5 feet 6 inches, usually wears a silver necklace." Miguel stopped wiping. He looked at me with confusion. Sir, I haven't seen anyone fitting that description. I'm only on the late shift. Are you looking for your partner? Yes, my wife. We were having dinner here 3 nights ago, right near the window, the Chilean sea base. She hated the wine list, remember? Miguel hesitated, rubbing his chin. Sir, I remember you. You dined here alone on Tuesday night. You sat by the window. I specifically remember you only ordering one portion of the sea base. My blood ran cold. No, that's wrong. She was there. She was wearing the cobalt blue dress. Miguel looked uncomfortable. Sir, I think maybe you should speak to the security office. We are not allowed to discuss passenger movements. The memory of the single plate of sea base hit me with the force of a physical blow. Did I only order one? No, I was sure we ordered two. But wait, I remembered her saying she wasn't very hungry that night, just taking a few bites from mine. Or was that another night? The corrosive power of the manipulated reality was starting to work on my mind. I was a professional, an archivist of truth, and even I couldn't trust my own sensory input when faced with total, unwavering contradiction. I backed away from Miguel, knowing the conversation was useless. He wasn't lying. He was reporting the data stream he had been exposed to. The entire operational reality of the Etheria had been edited to exclude Vera. As I retreated, I realized the ultimate horror. This wasn't an organization covering up a murder. This was an organization rewriting history. And my wife was the inconvenient artifact that had been scrubbed from the record. My final resort was a physical search, the one thing the digital system couldn't easily erase. I had to find a physical object, a scrap of paper, a hair, anything that proved she was real and had been here. I returned to the suite, determined to break the fourth wall of this horrifying theater. But when I reached my door, the Chronolink panel flashed a stark orange warning, access denied. Please report to guest services, Deck 5, for mandatory security debriefing. They knew I was hunting, and they were pulling me into their light. The dread solidified into a heavy, visceral weight. I was being commanded, not invited. My attempt to find a grounding truth had only accelerated the system's response. I moved toward Deck 5, the guest services area, which felt less like a concierge and more like the hub of a meticulous panopticon. The corridor leading to the office was deliberately wide, lined with sound-dampening panels and soft, pulsing light that seemed calibrated to lower my heart rate. Everything on the Etheria was designed to pacify, to erase the sharp edges of panic. I was met by a man I had never seen before, not one of the silent service units. He wore a high-collared, custom-tailored uniform and exuded an almost radioactive calm. His name badge read Director Reelan. Mr. Kess, Reelan said, gesturing me into an inner room. A minimalist space with a polished obsidian table and 2 ergonomic chairs. The room had no external windows, only a screen displaying a generic, tranquil visualization of slow-moving waves. Thank you for joining me. We detected an anomaly in your digital behavior. My anomaly, I replied, trying to keep the tremor from my voice, is that my wife is missing. Vera Kess. She was last seen heading to the hydrosphere this morning. Reelan sat down, placing his hands flat on the table. His eyes were disconcertingly steady. Elias, I understand that you are experiencing acute distress. That is why we are here. We have already conducted a comprehensive security review of your movements and the manifest, as requested by the attendants you spoke to. He activated the obsidian table surface. A high-resolution, scrollable timeline appeared, titled Elias Kess, Etheria Voyage 77, Chronology of Movement and Records. Allow me to walk you through the facts, Elias, Reelan continued, his voice smooth as oil. You boarded the Etheria on Tuesday, 1930 Universal Time Coordinated, as a single traveler. Your passport scan confirms this. Your initial Chronolink activation log confirms this. Your booking manifest, the one archived on independent international servers, confirms this. He scrolled to the dining logs. You dined alone on Tuesday and Wednesday, confirming single seating requests, confirmed by our server rotation records. Here are the security footage logs from your cabin door. We track every ingress and egress, Elias, for security. The footage played in a small window. It showed me entering and leaving the room, always alone. Even the night Vera and I had spent laughing over room service. The log showed me answering the door and taking the tray from a crew member, but Vera was absent from the frame, a non-entity, a ghost edited out of the physical space. This was the terrifying reveal. They weren't just editing data, they were editing reality. The entire system was fabricated to deny the existence of my wife. I focused on the single piece of verifiable truth I had retained, the scrubbed photo remnants. I'm a digital archivist, Rylan, I said, leaning forward, tasting bile. I know metadata. You can scrub files, but you leave traces. I found the shadow memory of a photograph I took this morning, precisely at 9:15 a.m., of Vera leaving the suite. It was deleted 10 minutes later by an external command signature, Ethereum AI version 5.1. Rylan didn't even flinch. He merely nodded slightly, as if I had complimented the quality of the upholstery. An astute observation, Elias. Your background is in digital integrity, yes? You understand the importance of redundancy and error correction. The Chronolink system, while exceptional, occasionally suffers phantom correlations due to radio interference in certain zones, particularly near the magnetic fields of the engine room. Our AI is designed to instantly detect and correct these data pollutants. He pulled up a highly technical, complex graph, full of intersecting lines and algorithms. It looked like legitimate systems data. At 9:15 a.m., your personal device suffered a temporary network glitch, registering an anomalous signal echo that briefly cross-referenced with your device ID, mimicking the presence of an unregistered partner device. The AI registered this as an error, a digital ghost, and immediately purged the resultant file, the image, and zeroed the log to maintain system integrity. It was an automated defense against digital contamination, Elias. It happens. He was explaining the erasure of my wife as a system debug, a momentary ripple in the code. A speculative concept turned horrifyingly mundane. This level of detail, the immediate, plausible, technically complex counter-narrative, was designed to fracture my conviction. He wasn't insulting my intelligence. He was demonstrating the superior intelligence of the network. Where is her physical luggage, Rylan? Her clothes, her toiletries, her passport? I demanded, desperate to introduce a physical anchor. We have already inventoried Zenith Suite 402, Elias. You checked in with one large suitcase and one carry-on. Both are present and accounted for. We note that the suitcase appears to contain items typical of a 2-week cruise, clothing, specific medications registered for you only, and several professional books related to digital architecture. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the cabin. I saw Vera's bright red dress, hanging on the hook. I saw her specific brand of lavender soap in the shower caddy. I opened my eyes and looked at Rylan. I need to see the cabin again. Right now. Rylan nodded gravely. Of course. We understand your disorientation. Come with me. He led me back to Suite 402. The journey felt short, controlled. He used his master chronolink to override my access denial. We stepped inside. The room was exactly as I had left it, the soft, synthesized waves washing the cabin in a hypnotic blue light. I went straight to the closet. One large, black suitcase mine. I opened it. It was exactly as Rylan described. My clothes, my books, my specific hypertension medication. I went to the bathroom. The caddy held my single razor, my specific brand of unscented soap, my plain black toothbrush. The second toothbrush slot was empty. The lavender soap was gone. I began tearing the room apart, throwing pillows, ripping the bedsheets back, checking under the vanity. I was frantic now, a man clawing at the seams of a meticulously stitched reality. Vera's things were here. I yelled, clutching a crumpled tissue. She had a specific silver necklace. Where is it? Rylan watched me with pitying concern. He did not move, did not raise his voice. Elias, you are searching for physical validation of a presence that, according to every verifiable record, digital, physical, and observational, never existed on this ship. This is a common symptom of acute stress and transient psychosis. He moved to the small, ornate writing desk and picked up a thick, leather-bound volume. You may recall this, Rylan said gently. This is the Etheria's official guest journal, provided to single travelers for reflective journaling during their voyage. I stared at the book. It was pristine. I had never opened it. Rylan opened the book to a random page. The handwriting was mine. Clear, distinct, undeniable. Day 3. The solitude is profound. I find myself enjoying the silence, the opportunity to truly disconnect from the noise of the world. It's hard to shake the memory of the collapse, but I feel lighter already, just me and the sea. I snatched the book. I hadn't written that. I knew I hadn't. Yet, the handwriting was flawless. The ink felt real. The sentiment, reflecting a single man recovering from trauma, was frighteningly persuasive. Reflective thought. Trauma creates fissures in the memory, gaps where the truth struggles to hold purchase. But when the outside world fills those gaps with a flawless, consistent lie, the trauma becomes the enemy of belief. I was facing a system that had not just removed Vera, but had systematically manufactured an entire, credible, solitary existence for me before I even stepped on board. My past trauma, the system failure, the debt, had provided the perfect, plausible motive for a solo, restorative cruise. The final piece of crushing evidence came when Rylan pulled out a printout of my banking transactions. Here is the evidence of your cruise purchase 6 months ago. The payment was made from your joint account, Elias, yes. But notice the line item, single Zenith occupancy, post-trauma retreat package. Paid in full. The family funds were dedicated to your healing. The documents were official, stamped by banks I recognized. The weight of the world and the overwhelming logic of the corporation pressed down on me. I realized the horrifying truth of the systematic poisoning motif from the original summary, but applied to the mind. They weren't poisoning the body, they were poisoning the memory. They were creating a reality so seamless that the victim becomes their own warden. Rylan stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, no longer professional, but possessive. Elias, the Kess name is highly respected in digital architecture. The Etheria Corporation values discretion and stability. Your wife, Vera, was an unstable variable. We have a saying here, the system abhors a glitch. We correct the errors. We restore the equilibrium. We can help you reintegrate. He extended a hand, holding something small and white, a packet of personalized medication, a mild sedative, to help ease the transition back to your intended, solitary reality. My breath hitched. I knew they wouldn't hurt me physically, not now. They were doing something far more insidious. They were threatening to redefine my soul. The sight of the sedative packet in Rylan's hand was the moment the dread reached its chilling zenith, crystallizing into raw, existential terror. I wasn't facing a conventional threat, a killer, a conspirator. I was facing an absolute, organizational demand for my surrender to their fabricated truth. I ignored the pills. I backed away, pressing my spine against the cool, polymer wall of the Zenith suite, a luxurious cage. I knew, with the cold certainty of a forensics expert, that if I accepted the sedative, I would be agreeing to the narrative. My own mind would become the final, most efficient tool of my wife's erasure. You don't understand, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. You haven't just scrubbed files. You've scrubbed a life. You violated the most sacred contract, shared reality. Why? Who is Vera to you? Rylan sighed, a slow, practiced exhalation that suggested vast patience with an inferior intellect. Vera, Elias, was a threat to the stability of the model. Her psychological profile, her inability to compartmentalize the emotional weight of your past failures, was flagged during the pre-boarding process. We specialize in restorative experiences. Unmanaged trauma is destabilizing to the ecosystem we maintain. The Etheria provides perfect, unblemished luxury. Imperfection is not permitted. He was suggesting that Vera was removed because she was sad, because her unresolved pain threatened the polished veneer of their product. The grounding fact here is related to behavioral economics. People are willing to pay extraordinary amounts of money for the illusion of control and perfect predictability, and corporations will go to extraordinary and unethical lengths to guarantee that experience. The Etheria was selling not just a cruise, but absolute, flawless emotional security. I looked around the room, desperately searching for anything Reelan had missed, any tiny physical imperfection. My eyes landed on the bathroom vanity again. Empty. Then I remembered the smell. On the first night, when we entered the suite, Vera had unpacked a tiny bottle of specialized, expensive essential oil, bergamot and cypress, that she always used to help her sleep. I remembered the scent distinctly, subtle, woodsy, and complex. I walked stiffly to the sink, pulled off the U-bin trap beneath the basin, and held the porcelain up to the light. It was clean, sanitized, and odorless. I moved to the shower drain. I removed the stainless steel grate, grimacing at the buildup of stagnant water and chemical residue. I brought it closer, inhaling deeply. Nothing but soap. But I remembered something else, a small detail I had pushed away in the chaos. The first night, Vera had complained about the water pressure and had yanked too hard on the shower head, pulling a tiny, ornate plastic cover off the water pressure valve, exposing the copper threading beneath. I went to the shower, pulling the glass door open. The shower head was perfectly intact, but on the floor of the shower stall, nestled against the tile where the stream usually ran, was a single, tiny, almost invisible artifact, a thin strand of hair. It was long, dark blonde, almost white under the LED light. Vera had dyed her hair to a vibrant ash blonde for the trip, but her natural, childhood hair color was a pale, almost flaxen blonde. She had often lamented that the darker colors never lasted. She had kept a tiny, almost bleached sample of her original hair in a locket, a strange habit tied to her own anxieties about changing too much. This hair was the flaxen blonde, too light for my own hair, too light for the ash blonde Vera was currently wearing. It was the physical evidence of the real Vera, the one that existed before the dye, before the trauma, before the ship. My speculative concept. This hair strand was not just physical proof. It was a ghost limb, a remnant of reality too small for the systematic cleanup to detect. It was proof that the physical erasure was possible, but not perfect. I palmed the hair, crumpling it into my fist, making sure Reelan didn't see it. It was my anchor. I don't need your sedatives, Reelan, I said, looking him straight in the eye. I need the truth about where you took her. Reelan tilted his head, a gesture of intellectual superiority. Elias, we are providing the only truth you will ever receive. The alternative is permanent containment for psychological instability. We have been monitoring your distress levels. You are close to breaking. He pulled a small, laminated card from his pocket. We are prepared to offer you a full refund, plus an additional settlement of 10 million euros, provided you sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding your psychotic episode on board the Etheria. The bribe. The corporate solution. They were trying to buy my trauma, to monetize my silence and my acceptance of the lie. They weren't afraid of the police. They were afraid of the disruption a verifiable truth would cause to their flawless system. 10 million euros, Elias. Enough money to retire, to erase your past debt. You can go home, a free man, a single man. We will even provide psychiatric support to help you process the trauma of this loss. The loss of a relationship that, due to the stressors of your business failure, clearly ended long ago, existing only in your hopeful memory. The sheer audacity of the manipulation made me feel dizzy. They were using my deepest pain, the financial ruin, the stress that had fractured my marriage, as the cause for my delusion. Reflective thought. The most terrifying prison is not one made of steel, but one made of perfect logic. When the entire world aligns to tell you a lie, the fight is not against the enemy, but against the sanity you rely upon to define yourself. I stared at the paperwork, a thick document of impenetrable legal jargon designed to absorb my entire life story into their silence. If I sign this, I asked, my voice dangerously calm, do I get to leave the ship when we dock in 3 days? You will be escorted to the most private disembarkation point, Reelan assured me. You will never be contacted again. We require absolute discretion, Elias. Your life will be restored to perfect order. I glanced down at the single, faint flaxen hair in my fist. A ghost of reality. If I stayed and fought, I would be committed, locked in the ship's internal psychological ward, and eventually released as a broken, traumatized man whose claims would be instantly discredited by his documented mental breakdown. If I left, I could hold on to this single piece of proof. I could fight the narrative from the outside. But the price was acknowledging that, at least publicly, Vera never existed. The choice was between preserving my sanity by accepting the lie, or sacrificing my freedom by pursuing the truth within their controlled environment. I need to think, I said, rubbing my temples. I need 24 hours alone in my cabin. Reelan smiled, the first crack in his professional facade. It wasn't a friendly expression, it was predatory. Take your time, Elias. But the Etheria demands resolution. The system will wait only so long for self-correction. He left, leaving the envelope of money and the thick NDA on the obsidian table. The door hissed shut. I was alone, trapped between absolute digital fiction and the crushing weight of corporate omnipotence, holding a single, irreplaceable truth in my palm. The engine's thrum was the pulse of my own encroaching madness. The silence in the Zenith suite after Reelan left was thicker than the void outside the window. I stood by the obsidian table, staring at the envelope containing 10 million euros, the price of my shared history. They were offering me financial salvation in exchange for emotional and moral death. I unfurled the tiny strand of flaxen hair I had salvaged. It was microscopically thin, almost translucent, yet in my hand, it was heavier than the entire Etheria. It was the physical fingerprint of a person who had been meticulously deleted. It was the crack in the perfect logic of my prison. I had 24 hours to make a decision, but I knew I couldn't just sit and wait. I needed to know where they took her and, more importantly, what she was being used for. This wasn't just a cover-up. It was an organized system of removal, an industrial-scale rejection of human messiness. I went back to my laptop and pulled up the network logs again, specifically looking for the anomalies I had spotted earlier near the hydrosphere, the fluctuating GPS signal that had briefly placed Vera near a laundry corridor. Reelan had dismissed it as radio interference. I dismissed Reelan. I cross-referenced the coordinates with the architectural schematics I had downloaded from an unsecured system cache on day 1, professional curiosity, now a lifeline. The corridor led to a subdeck marked Experimental Filtration and Waste Management, a windowless, structurally isolated section of the ship. This was the key, the physical location where the glitch was absorbed. I needed to access that area without triggering the systemic override Reelan had undoubtedly placed on my chronolink. I had to become the digital ghost I was accused of chasing. Grounding fact, in complex cybersecurity, often the most secure systems rely on maintaining the appearance of simplicity. If a system is forced to process an impossible command, a paradox, it often defaults to an insecure, fail-safe mode designed for maintenance, not passenger use. I grabbed the chronolink that was synced to the Etheria's network, the one that defined me as the single passenger, Elias Kess. Using a portable signal jammer I kept for professional security tests, another piece of professional paranoia now proving invaluable, I created a high-frequency saturation field around the suite. This temporarily blinded the ship's local sensors. Working quickly, I used my specialized data reader to overwrite the Chronolink's firmware. I didn't try to change my ID, which was too complex. I changed its functionality. I stripped it of all user privileges and replaced its code with a single, looping command: access denied, error 404, identity not found. When I put the newly corrupted Chronolink on my wrist, the integrated AI voice, usually warm and welcoming, stuttered. Identity unverified. Emergency protocol initiated. Passenger access protocol suspended. I was now digitally invisible, or rather, a non-entity. A system error. The ship might register a phantom device, but it wouldn't register Elias Kess. I left the suite and took the service stairs down, moving through areas of the ship that smelled of ozone, chlorine, and damp steel. The contrast between the pristine passenger decks and this utilitarian underworld was stark. Here, the hum of the engine was deafening, a churning roar of cold, indifferent power. I located the corridor marked filtration, secured by a heavy, magnetically sealed door. I held up my now useless Chronolink. The door didn't even register a presence. I pulled out a small, specialized lockpick tool designed for marine applications. My hands were steady, trained by years of stress. I worked quickly, bypassing the mechanical latch and the secondary electromagnetic seal. The door clicked open with a faint metallic groan. I stepped into a small, dark airlock, the air thick and cold. I moved deeper. The area was a labyrinth of pipes, generators, and filtration machinery. But in the center of the room, behind a reinforced glass wall, was a structure that made my blood freeze. It was a small, high-tech observation unit. Inside, there were several beds separated by dividers, resembling a specialized medical containment facility. And in those beds, hooked up to monitoring equipment, were people. I crept closer to the glass. They were all passengers or former passengers. Their faces were pale, their expressions vacant, as if their consciousness had been gently removed. They were restrained, not aggressively, but medically. And every single person wore a matching, unmarked white Chronolink bracelet. I saw a woman with vibrant red hair, the wife of a couple I had seen dining cheerfully on day 2. I saw an elderly man I remembered playing bridge with on day 3. They were all the unstable variables Reelin had mentioned, people with underlying psychological or emotional vulnerabilities that threatened the perfect environment of the Etheria. They weren't being experimented on with bioweapons or drugs. They were being contained because their trauma, their human complexity, was deemed incompatible with the Etheria's curated fantasy. They were victims of psychological quarantine. Then I saw her, lying in the furthest bed under a thermal blanket. Vera. She looked small, diminished, but alive. Her eyes were closed. She had the same vacant, serene expression as the others. She was hooked up to a continuous four-drip, and a complex headset rested over her temples. I pressed my hands against the cold glass. My wife had not been murdered. She had been absorbed. I focused on the headset. It was a sophisticated neuroinduction device. My speculative concept emerged immediately. The Etheria wasn't just editing external reality. It was editing internal reality. The ship was systematically placing these glitches into a shared, induced coma, a collective dream state where their memories of the crews and their partners were being perfectly rewritten, reinforced by soothing neural signals, erasing the trauma and replacing it with a quiet, pleasant solitude. They were being reprogrammed to believe they had traveled alone and returned healed. The ultimate horror wasn't the crime. It was the perfection of the cleanup. I frantically searched the physical area for an entrance to the containment unit. There was none. It was a sealed, self-contained module, accessible only through a specialized pressurized airlock, likely controlled by Ryland's office. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the single strand of flaxen hair. I pressed it against the glass where Vera lay. She was so close, yet separated by layers of technology and corporate malice. As I stood there, witnessing the systemic erasure of human complexity, a light flickered in the corner of my eye. The camera, a small, highly specialized optical sensor I hadn't noticed before, hidden in the machinery, had picked up my presence, despite the jammer. The jammer was only masking my chronolink. It wasn't obscuring my physical form. A low, insistent alarm began to sound in the corridor behind me. Not a siren, but a deep, subsonic warning tone designed to induce panic. I heard footsteps. Fast, professional, non-panic footsteps. Ryland and security. I looked at Vera one last time, my eyes burning with impossible choices. If I stayed, I would join her in the containment unit, my mind rewritten, my existence neutralized. If I ran, I would escape, but I would leave her trapped in that induced serenity. Reflective thought. There is a unique horror in fighting a system designed not for malice, but for absolute, flawless convenience. This wasn't hatred. This was quality control. And in their system, my love for Vera was the most egregious contaminant. I turned and ran back down the service corridor. I had my proof. The location, the knowledge of the operation, and the single, flaxen hair. It was all I had left to fight the corporation from the outside. I managed to scramble back into the Zenith suite seconds before the security team arrived. The door hissed shut behind me. I heard Ryland's voice, cold and sharp, barking orders just outside. I lunged for my laptop, grabbing the external hard drive containing the network schematics and my forensic analysis of the scrub data. The door panel flashed red. A synthesized voice boomed through the speakers. Elias Kess. Final warning. Failure to comply will result in immediate neurological override. I was too late. I was backed into the corner, the hard drive in my hand. Ryland's master chronolink overrode the lock. The door slid open, revealing Ryland and two large security personnel in black uniforms. Ryland looked disappointed, not angry. You chose poorly, Elias. You chose the messy truth over the perfect peace. The system will correct you now. The moment Ryland's security team entered the Zenith suite, the perfect, luminous atmosphere of the cabin shattered. They moved with silent, synchronized efficiency. I held the external hard drive, my only piece of objective, non-corrupted truth, clutching the knowledge of Vera's fate like a fragile weapon. Drop the device, Elias, Ryland commanded, his voice clipped and precise. This is the final offer. Sign the agreement, take the sedative, and we can still grant you release with the payment. I backed further into the corner. I know what you did. I saw her. Deck 3. The containment unit. You're trapping people in induced psychological coma because they're unstable variables. Ryland's face remained impassive. You saw the waste filtration unit, Elias. The stress is acute. You are constructing narratives to cope with profound loneliness. Let us help you. One of the security officers lunged. I reacted instinctively, not fighting, but moving to buy time. I smashed the external hard drive, my proof, into the edge of the obsidian table, ensuring the plastic shell cracked, but not enough to render the data useless. I then stuffed the damaged drive and the tiny strand of flaxen hair into the lining of my jacket, relying on the fact that I was too high value for physical violence. They restrained me immediately, smoothly pivoting my arms behind my back. They did not hurt me. They controlled me. They administered a light, rapidly acting neuroagent through a patch on my neck. Not the heavy sedative, but a fast-acting paralytic designed to render me compliant. My muscles seized, and the ability to articulate my thoughts dissolved into a buzzing fog. Ryland knelt beside me. He didn't look triumphant. He looked like a surgeon addressing a difficult case. You forced our hand, Elias. We do not destroy talent. We repurpose it. Your expertise in metadata persistence, your commitment to the truth, it is admirable and tragically disruptive. He directed the security officers to remove the broken hard drive from the table. He didn't even check the jacket for the concealed proof. They were too confident in their systemic dominance. I wanted to scream, to tell him I had seen Vera, that I knew the precise nature of their crime. A systematic psychological erasure designed to protect their perfect market product. But all I could manage was a dry, rasping sound. They didn't take me back to the containment unit. They took me straight back to Rieland's office, the room of obsidian and synthesized waves. Rieland produced a new set of papers. Not the NDA for the 10 million euros, but a complex contract for consultancy services. Grounding fact: corrupt institutions rarely eliminate talented individuals. They neutralize them by integrating them into the system they hate, thus turning the victim's greatest strength, expertise, against them. Your memory will be treated, Elias. Not erased, but recontextualized, Rieland explained, tapping the contract. You will remember the pain, the loneliness, the trauma of your business collapse, and the restorative cruise you took alone. You will remember the delusion of a wife. You will remember the terror of madness. But you will not remember us. The most terrifying speculative concept emerged. They weren't just erasing memory. They were planting the mechanism of self-doubt. They were creating an echo chamber in my mind. You are too valuable to waste, Rieland continued, forcing a pen into my unresponsive hand. You will become an external consultant for the Etheria Corporation. Your task: ensuring the digital integrity of the Chronolink system. You will be responsible for detecting and eliminating all potential digital ghosts, like the one that briefly appeared on your phone this morning. He was forcing me to become the enforcer of the lie. The man who specialized in preserving truth would now specialize in perfecting erasure. I felt the immense, magnetic pull of the system. I was defeated, trapped, neutralized. The trauma of losing Vera, compounded by the agony of fighting the narrative, was overwhelming my resistance. I wanted the pain to stop. I wanted the logic to take over. The pen wavered. I knew I couldn't fight the paralysis or the security team. My last defense was the concealed hard drive and the single strand of hair. I had to survive and carry that fragment of truth out into the real world. With a superhuman effort, fighting the paralyzing agent, I managed to scrawl a barely legible signature on the contract. Rieland beamed, a true, satisfied smile this time. Excellent, Elias. Welcome to the team. The following 12 hours were a blur. I was given the full sedative dose, enough to sink a battleship. I remember the white noise, the pulsing light, and Rieland's voice, insistent and soothing, guiding my consciousness through the revision process. He reinforced the story. The cruise was alone. The sadness was deserved. The wife was a hallucination caused by financial and emotional ruin. I remember waking up hours later, groggy and empty, back in the Zenith suite. The 10 million euros and the NDA were gone, replaced by the consultancy contract and a significant advance payment transferred to my account. Reflective thought. We believe the human spirit is unyielding, but the mind is a delicate, chemical thing. When the trauma is real and the narrative of the corporation is flawless, surrender becomes indistinguishable from healing. The Etheria docked 3 days later in the quiet port city of Bergen. I was escorted off the ship. No lines, no customs, just a silent car waiting. I was a ghost leaving a ghost ship. I remember standing on the pier, the cold Norwegian air hitting my face, and the crushing weight of profound, isolating grief settling over me. I was a single man who had paid a fortune to go on a healing cruise and was returning healed, but the healing was a lie. I had lost something, but I couldn't quite remember what. A profound, aching phantom limb. I ran my hand across the rough lining of my jacket. My fingers touched the small, cold metal corner of the damaged hard drive and the silky, almost weightless texture of the hair. The memory of the containment unit, Vera, serene and suspended, flared behind my eyes, raw and agonizing. But the integrated narrative kicked in instantly. No, that was a dream, a psychological projection. You were hallucinating. I am home now. I am rich, debt-free, and highly respected in my field. I am the Etheria Corporation's most efficient external consultant, ensuring their digital perfection remains untarnished. I fight digital ghosts every day, but sometimes, late at night, when the silence is complete, I remember the exact smell of the chlorine and ozone in that subdeck corridor. And I pull out the damaged hard drive. I know the data is there, but the moment I try to run the forensic recovery, the memory fog thickens, the pain becomes unbearable, and my professional instincts tell me, error. This file is corrupt. Do not open. I look at the single, flaxen hair, still sealed in a tiny plastic folder. I hold it up to the light. It doesn't prove Vera existed to the world. It only proves, in the agonizing emptiness of my heart, that the reality I live in is a beautiful, expensive lie. Now every night I still cry, not for the loss of a life, but for the loss of a truth. And somewhere out at sea, the nightmare continues, sailing perfectly toward its next destination, absorbing the soft, messy edges of human pain into its flawless, terrifying system. The digital noise fades. The deep thrum of the Etheria's engines is finally replaced by the distant, indifferent sound of morning traffic outside my high-rise window. The sun is a pale, hesitant disk, struggling to burn through the city haze, bringing cold illumination instead of warmth. I sit here in my immaculate apartment, sipping chemically perfect coffee, a consultant without a conscience, haunted by a person the world assures me never existed. The chronolink is off my wrist, but the conditioning remains, a constant whisper of doubt.